And we're going. We're fully charged. We're almost paying attention. And I've got study questions for a change. We're going back over this because there's enough in it that we didn't go over. We got stuck on easements last time. Can I have one of those too? Thank you. Let's see. Yeah, I stopped right about principle 10. I don't know, maybe. I know we covered 9. Oh, yeah, prescription. Yeah, we covered 10. Long. Yeah, we covered that. We sort of started on adverse possession. Everybody goes on and on about adverse possession in these legal courses. And it's harder than hell to prove. It's easy to do, but hard to prove. What you looking for? But anyway, you gotta have it. There are certain things that have to be, and it's got to be open, notorious for a statutory period, and it's gonna, that statutory period varies from state to state and circumstance by circumstance. Let's see, open, notorious, hostile. And basically, if you ever in that process say, I'm not trying to take anything that's not mine, you just blew your case. And I've seen people do it on tape, which is, their lawyer should have been there with a muzzle because they just blew their case. Now, what's the difference between adverse possession and acquiescence?
Acquiescence can be agreed upon.
Okay, what's missing from acquiescence?
Hostile.
Hostile, yeah. Acquiescence is not permanent. Like it can be. See, here's the thing. If two people, next door neighbors, they get along real well, they don't really know where their property boundary is, and they don't want to pay for a survey. Surveys are expensive, as everybody knows. So they agree that the existing fence line is the property line. They shake hands. This was in 1974. It is now 2013. A is dead, B is on his deathbed, and the heirs are wondering, where is the property line? Now, what if A, he's dead, knew damn well where the property line was, and agreed on the fence line because he got an extra 30 feet of tillable land out of it. What's that called?
Well, it shouldn't have happened by estoppel, but...
Yeah, that's the thing. Estoppel prevents him from profiting by that.
So if that was proven after the fact, say his son went along with it and continued to use that 30-foot strip, and then this guy's son realized what was happening and proved otherwise, could he, guy A, who knew his dad had taken advantage?
He's son of A.
Right. So son of A knew his dad had taken advantage of the situation and continued to do so, and did not say, oh no, I'm sorry, I see where this is wrong, let's remedy it. Could this son of B come back and make a stink for son of A?
Watch what you call him.
Okay. But you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. Can he?
Right.
That's a good question. That's one of the most expensive phrases you can ever hear in a lawyer's office. That's an interesting question. Now, the time to get all this done is before A and B die.
Right.
This is why, this is a trip to the family law lawyer can really pay off. And I have a friend who is a family law lawyer, and he has filled me in. It's not just wills, it's the other stuff. And paying for a survey before A or B dies as part of fiduciary duty to the estate is important. If A and B both agree, it doesn't matter if they agree, if one or the other pays for a survey,
Right.
then that boundary is discovered. The boundary by agreement, based on the unknown line, is taken over by, is supplanted by the found monuments,
Okay.
if they were there to be found, or if they are recoverable, or if they are replaceable. And this is going to be true in Texas law and in laws in all those other states. But the important thing is you can have this property line by agreement unsigned. You can even have a property line by agreement signed that son of A, son of B can dispute, should they care to go to the expense of having it surveyed.
So if it had not been surveyed and if it had not been agreed upon and actually deeded, okay, I'm already using this 30-foot strip of land,
Mhm.
I will purchase it from you. They had a survey done and that man bought it.
Nobody ever says that. They
Right,
just
that's
say,
what I'm saying.
"Well, I'm
So
taken to the fence."
Since that, Gotcha. So then son A and
Mhm.
the sons are just,
Mhm.
they would be out of luck if one or the other chose to get a survey to prove the line was otherwise.
Well, I'm not sure if there's a question in there.
Yes.
What is the question?
Well, it's more of verification,
Yeah.
I guess. Just that, if B said, I don't believe
Okay,
you.
is B getting the short end of the stick? Or
He is currently.
Okay, B's getting the short
B's
end of the stick.
getting the short end of the stick. He sees that he's missing out
He
on
rather
30
suspects.
foot. Right. Doesn't like son
Yeah.
of A, says, I'm going to hire me a surveyor.
Mhm.
Surveyor finds the original monuments. And then what would they do then? He would take him to court and say, you're on my property?
He could theoretically just tear down the fence and build a new one.
Because it's on his property.
Now, is it liable to end up in court? Probably.
Sure.
Is it liable to end up in a shooting match? Maybe. Because the A and B left their affairs in disorder.
Right.
And, you'll see this time again. People did not make fiduciary, they did not do their fiduciary duty to their estates before they died. So that they kicked things down the road. And, it was assumed a long time ago that rural land just wasn't worth the effort, the price. Well, that's changed. And, that 30 foot is quite wide enough to put an oil well on. So, yeah, it gets, we're getting into the reason that you learn this stuff is if B hires you to survey for him, and you kind of suspect, but then you don't, and then you find those monuments, which indicate that A has been using more than his deed allowed, is it encroachment? Only a court can prove encroachment.
Right.
Is it something that if you're surveying for B, are you obligated to tell B
Yes.
that this is the situation?
Yes.
If you're surveying for A, are you obligated to tell A that you think he has more land under fence than he ought,
Yes.
or than his deed calls
Like
for?
that he is
Yeah.
legally allotted.
Now,
Yes.
what if you are surveying for B, you're surveying for A, right? And B gets a look at the survey that you did for A and sues A. Where are you in all this
just
as the
fact
surveyor?
gatherer.
Hmm?
In the middle.
In the middle. And what is the worst place to be in the court of law?
In the middle.
In the middle. Because you are surveying for A. B sees this. How he saw it, you don't know. But based on the strength of the survey, he then institutes legal proceedings.
So who would determine
Do you
the
have
strength of
do
the
you
survey?
have a come on privity? You have a
Okay.
contract with A. Do you have privity with B? What if B depends on the strength of the survey that you did not do for him, but he found a signed, sealed copy? Do you, based on that, he, goes to court, he tears down a fence, he does this, he does that. Does he have privity with you? Can he sue you?
Anybody can sue anybody.
Anybody can sue anybody, and surveyors frequently get sued by third parties.
Yeah.
Welcome to the real world.
But if it benefits him, why would he?
If he loses.
Uh-huh.
Nah.
Because what if they're both out there? Let's say you go out there and survey for
I
somebody.
favor giving them pistols myself.
And his neighbor sees you out there.
Yeah.
He comes and joins a little party. What do? You can't run one off.
Also, what if A tells you to get off his land while you're surveying the boundary,
You got to get off his land.
but it's not his land?
Still, if it's fenced in, you got to get off his land.
It's the reasonable and prudent thing to do to remain unperforated. Have you ever had someone come out with a gun?
Yes, sir. Even here.
It's not a pleasant thing, and even if the guy's smiling, the gun changes the equation.
Yeah, they tell you to get off the land, no matter whose land you're on. You just
Yeah, it's time to go to the store.
get the sheriff or whatever to accompany,
Yeah.
and that's the only
Now,
thing to do.
in Texas, as an RPLS, do you have the right to request a court order on a private survey? You're surveying for B. A doesn't want you crossing the fence. Do you have the right to call the sheriff to get a court order to get on A's land?
Depends.
Nope.
Theoretically, you don't. Basically, what you have to do is you have to do a little bit of imaginative surveying. Why do you think I make people do hidden or inaccessible location exercises with instruments? You're at point A, you shoot, you backsight B, occupy A, turn to there. You backsight A, occupy B, turn to there. That's a location if you're just shooting fence corners. But that's one of the reasons that I have people do it. Because you show up wearing your little GPS, funny tin-lined hat and try and get a location on those, you might just end up in the emergency room. But if you are familiar with how to shoot remote locations, you can
intersection by bearings, right?
Not just by bearings,
Well,
but
because you use
if you're using a total station or any other
we're
survey
looking at
instrument.
states. That's it, right?
Hmm?
Let's see, set up here, backside here.
Right, and then you turn angles.
Set up here, backside there, turn there.
And
where it
it's
intersects.
just like those triangle solutions you loved so much, because you ended up with, from your base bearing and your two angles, you now have bearing and distance, intersect.
You don't even need distance, so.
With two bearings, it doesn't hurt. I mean, back in the old days when all you had was a T1, you didn't send your chain crew into no man's land.
Yeah.
That's why you can do it just with distance. You can do it with bearing and distance twice. That's why those reflectorless things are so nifty, because you can double check, you can triple check your work. But you get into some really hairy situations. What I'm getting at is the reason you're studying this is maybe to keep you alive in the field and to absolutely positively write down stuff like this and tell your client what's going on. So you have to understand that this fence line may or may not be an encroachment. Only a court can determine that something is an encroachment. It looks like that B has a little bit less land than his deed calls for, and A, his fence is not where you think it should be. But not having a complete record of all of the agreements that were ever made, are you in a position to say this is definitely an encroachment?
Nope.
What if A, long time ago, said, oh yeah, and there's a reason that that fence is offline, because God knows what. Maybe there was an old corral there when A moved in 1948, which is why the fence goes around it. So, you're just collecting facts, but if you don't know the legality behind what it is you're collecting, you can't report to your client what he needs to know. So, adverse possession is different from acquiescence. We already talked about prescriptive use. That's where if you see tire tracks, cutting a corner on somebody's land or going through somebody's land, you shoot them. And, shots are cheap. When you're walking, it's a great idea if you're doing a boundary survey to actually walk the boundary. It's sort of required in law, if you are surveying the boundary of a tract, that you actually make the circuit of the tract. They call it, running the boundary, which I'm not going to run, I'm going to walk. But how else will you know if somebody else's fence comes in, if there is a prescriptive easement usage going on, etc.? Oh yeah, Principle 11. We've gone over what is necessary. How is it proved? It's proved in court. These are, Principle 11 questions. If successful, how far back do the rights acquired go back in time, as far as the adverse possession is claimed? Why is this time period important? I've asked this question before and Jacob answered it. One word answer covers almost everything in Texas. Oil. Because if you're claiming adverse possession of this land and it's got an oil well on it, you get the royalties going back as far as you have claimed possession.
What does that mean, though, as far as you have claimed possession, though?
Remember you talk about the limitation periods.
Uh-huh.
That's as far back as you're going.
As far as you've been paying taxes on it, as far as...
If it depends on how you're claiming. And adverse possession can be without any paperwork whatsoever, 25, 30 years. If you're paying taxes on it,
Would you have to live there for 25, 30 years?
You don't necessarily have to live on it. You just have to be, you have to do constructive usage so that anybody can see. Like if you are just planting crops on it, no. If you are just, no fences, no nothing. If you are just grazing livestock on it, no. It generally takes fences and buildings.
Gotcha.
It takes, things that actually make it look like you're using this land. An old barn, yeah. Even if it's not being used, that's constructive use. Fences are always, fences to keep people out and keep things in are always a sign of constructive use. Okay. Oh yeah. and the rights go as far back as you're claiming. So if you make a successful claim in court to adverse possession, you get the royalties going back. And if you make it, this is more a general thing. I'm not sure if this works in Texas. If you are successful in your adverse possession claim, then the person who loses has to pay your lawyer bill.
Really?
Yeah. So it pays to defend your property rights. You don't, the whole point of adverse possession is not to reward the people who are doing it, but to penalize the people who are so inattentive to their property that they allow that sort of misuse. In other words, they are not good stewards of their land. That's the theory behind it. Everybody, because Anglo-Saxons and Normans also really felt that the person, the lord of the manor, the person who claimed ownership of the land, part of his soul inhabited that land, and to allow strangers to walk on it without permission was, just letting them violate your ownership of it and your soul. You have an obligation to defend that. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to go out and start chopping heads, but you have to let people know this is mine. So, the statutes of adverse possession vary by state. That's, we'll get into that in Texas. Wherever you're going to practice, you have to know the statutes. And it's like the statutes of limitation in criminal law. It limits someone's ability. Like in criminal law, you have the statutes of limitation that limit the government's right to take you to court. In civil law, the statutes of limitation are to prevent the inattentive property owner from taking you to court, because he's already lost possession of his land through negligence. Okay. 13, it's almost self-evident, but we'll go through it. 12, the adverse claimant is charged with the burden of proof if the claimant fails to prove compliance with all adverse possession requirements. The rightful owner is presumed never to have been ousted. The person making the adverse possession claim, the case has to be airtight. And it has to be airtighter and airtighter as the years go on. Because rather than give adverse possession, now a lot of courts are giving easements. Like you have the right to use it, but you don't own it. So I don't like the idea of adverse possession. But on the other hand, if someone is so careless as to not know their own boundaries. Who is immune from an adverse possession claim?
Probably the government.
Well, yeah, it doesn't run against the state. And that's true. That's true all over the United States. And in Texas, there are court cases after court cases after court cases. But who, as individuals, cannot have an adverse possession claim run against them? It's in the book.
Isn't that way down there on number 15, though? Also?
That too. I was trying to, just because it's in a different place doesn't mean you don't get to answer it. Basically, this is something I forgot, and it wasn't until I reread the book. Oh, yeah. Disabled. So if the owner of the estate is disabled,
And they don't specify
and,
anything.
like he can't get out and walk the bounds, you cannot run an adverse possession claim against them. If they're retarded,
Oh.
and you mentally challenged, whatever you want to use, whatever word you want to use, then you might, theoretically, might be able to run an adverse possession claim against the estate, the person who is in charge of the affairs of. But no, mentally incompetent is.
What about a prisoner?
He may be SOL, but I don't know. That's a great question. I think you ought to look it up. Generally, prisoners don't have a whole lot of excess land.
I don't know about
I
that.
know of
Yeah.
one.
I know a couple myself.
Okay.
I mean,
What was he growing on that land that caused him to be the guest of the state?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, as long as you grow, sell, whatever, as long as you got,
Innovative agriculture, was it?
as long as you got a stamp,
Mm-hmm.
you really can't get it taken away by the state.
He got a stamp.
Yeah, well, you know, with the big people that make tons and tons of money, how they get away from getting their land and stuff taken away,
Are you talking about a marijuana stamp?
or the other package stamp too. Yeah.
Okay. You used to be able to go down to
It's where you go.
Secretary, I forget where,
Oh.
and they don't just give them out. You used to be able to pay $10.
Yeah.
They were great gifts. A marijuana tax stamp.
Yes, sir.
They were engraved. They were nice looking. You think they were like dollar bills. They were that nicely engraved.
that'd be awesome.
But no, I don't know about prisoners. But active duty military cannot have an adverse possession claim run against them. So, yeah, prisoner, that's another issue. And I don't know the answer to that one. But basically, against the state, it never runs. It can be 150 years of usage. If it's a platted roadway that belongs in fee simple to the state, county, whatever. There's a road going all the way from San Antonio to El Paso that is theoretically federal land from now till whenever, because it was laid out, I think, when we were still a state. Richard Walters is the resident expert on that long, thin piece of real estate. But it basically parallels 10, and there's one from the north that parallels 20. Or rather, 10 and 20 were built alongside where those were. But there are roads in central Texas that go through farmland. It's the original road. It was the old Spanish Trail. And it went all the way from like Eagle Pass, which is where Santa Ana came across, and it goes all the way to where the city of Houston is. And in Houston, they have Old Spanish Trail as a road. It goes all the way out to the monument, the San Jacinto Monument. So anyway, now, if you have an adverse possession claim, A against B, A wins. A has clear title. Does that prevent C from bringing an adverse possession claim
I can switch.
against
The
A?
language has already been
Against
adversely
A.
possessed.
Yeah.
It
It
depends.
it all depends. Yeah, a lot of things get really, really messy in the law. But basically, just because A wins doesn't mean C can't sue A. Now, he might have a hard time making a claim against a brand new title, freshly washed by the court. But there's nothing to prevent C from bringing a title action against A. Okay. 13, not a whole lot different. A land title granted through adverse possession either extinguishes the rightful owner's written title and vests a new title in the former adverse possessor, or creates it's a brand new and superior title. So basically all of the cloud on title that between A and B is removed, and the winner gets everything. And then principle 14. If you show up, if you are doing the survey after the adverse possession is officially decided in the court, even if you then find the original monuments, too late.
Really?
If it's adverse possession, has to be decided by the court. That's the trick, because somehow, somewhere along the line, someone should have done the survey. Someone should have looked for those original
You can't go
monuments.
out there and survey after the fact.
After the fact, it's too late.
Wow.
Yeah, that's why adverse possession really, it's a when we call it hostile, it is. And there are a lot of places you'll see reference to Torrens title. Anybody ever run across a Torrens title? They have them some in like Houston and Austin, but almost nowhere in the state of Texas. It was invented in Australia. And basically they had land courts there. And it's impossible to do adverse possession in a Torrens title, because every time it changes hands, it goes to court. It's like a probate court. Goes to a Torrens court and gets a brand new stamp, and it's ready to go. And so that way, Torrens title places don't have title insurance because the document is all the title insurance you need. Guess who doesn't like Torrens titles? Title insurance companies. Principle 15, unless a statute provides otherwise, adverse possession does not run against the government, state, county, city, and municipal water district. That's a quasi-public. So if they've got an easement on something, or if another entity cannot take their land for better use. Schools, ECISD, or more precisely Dallas Independent School District, wanted, they had land. And I forget, it was, I think, the Dallas Transit, DART, wanted to take land from the school. They wanted to run they wanted to condemn school land for rail. Guess what? They couldn't, because there was no taking of school property, one governmental agency by taking land
Not
that
even
another
then.
one owned. Now, what if, and I actually know someone involved in this case, the Dallas Independent School District land was it's an old school building, built of stone and all that. It was built in like the 1890s, 1910, something like that. And the school district no longer uses it for school purposes. It was donated to the school district to be used for school purposes.
They might use it in the future.
Maybe yes, maybe no.
To school property.
But what if they decide to sell it to another entity? What if the original deed said sold to the forerunner of Dallas Independent School District to be used for school purposes?
So in other words, you can't sell it?
The school district, can they sell it?
Yes.
It depends. If the heirs are still alive, of the person who sold it to, like, basically when I say sold, I mean gave.
Okay, gay.
Yeah, that's a donation to the school, and the school no longer wants to use it. They want to sell it and pocket the money. Do they have that right?
Nope, now there's people still alive.
That's the point. And there's a similar issue in Dallas with what used to be the main library building, which the current, basically there are two heirs left. And the Dallas Public Library, they can't do a thing with this building that is sitting in downtown Dallas. They want to sell it, but they can't because the two heirs would love to get that building back because it was a donation.
So if those heirs passed away, then they could, or they would have to deal with
They would have to do, actually, neither heir has heirs. So,
So then what happens?
I think what is going to happen is that the library is just going to sit and wait until they croak. Another 20, 30 years. But if, this is the whole thing about if there are conditions attached to the deed, then when those conditions are no longer met, you can have a reversion to the original donor or original owner. Similar, you can have someone with a life estate in a property. Like a widow has a life estate in the property, in the house.
So even though she wasn't partial owner on paper, her life estate enables her to stay there after her husband passes away.
Could be.
Okay.
And if, there are some life estates for the worthless second cousin who never could hold a job.
Right, because I'm going to leave all that to him when I go.
Yeah, well, he gets a place to live and a stipend. So he gets what's called a life estate, and he can't will that property to his son. He gets to live in it, but he can't will it.
He doesn't really have any control over it.
So there are many. This is what you have. Just what if the worthless, second cousin wants you to survey the land so he can sell it? Make sure you get your money up front, because he doesn't have. You cannot attach to the value of that property to get your money back, because he doesn't own it. How would you find that out? When you do the deeds. Life is interesting, isn't it? Oh, yeah. How could it run against a disabled person? It can't. What is a remainder man, and why can it not run against? Yeah. That's in the book, and I really, I want you to at least have some acquaintance with that. Yeah, look it up. What is a remainder man?
A person who holds or is entitled to receive a remainder. All
Thank
right?
you.
Yeah, that's...
Huh?
Yeah, you got a bigger book.
Well, and then a remainder for property in a descendant's estate, the property that is not otherwise specifically devised or bequeathed in a will.
Mm-hmm. See if you got a better definition.
Oh, okay. It says, for example, if a grant is to A for life and then to B, B's future interest is a remainder. Okay. So then B would be the remainder.
So B can sue A for waste.
For what?
Waste.
What
Have you ever heard the expression wasteland?
Uh-huh.
Waste is land that is not being used appropriately.
Okay.
That is, if you allow, you had this wonderful cow pasture, all grass, and you ignore it for so long that the mesquite takes it over entirely. And then does anybody else, like if you got it, you're A, you have it for your life estate, you have no heirs. B, named in the same will. Not your will, but the will where you got the property,
Right.
where you didn't get fee simple ownership, you got a life estate. What's the difference between fee simple ownership and a life estate?
Well, if you have fee simple, you may buy and sell and divide up, but if it's a life estate, you have to go buy that deed, and you don't have any control over it.
Right.
Yeah.
And what's the one, if you have fee simple ownership, what can you do with that property that someone who has just a life estate can't do?
Sell it.
Sell it. It's called alienation.
Okay.
You can alienate that property. And in the Constitution, not the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, talking about unalienable rights. And there are certain rights that are so sacred you cannot alienate them.
No one can
You cannot
remove you from them.
you cannot sell yourself into slavery because you cannot alienate that right. You cannot take out a contract with someone to kill you. Well, a court of law will not enforce that contract.
Right.
There are things you just can't alienate. And if you're just the person with a life estate in the property, you cannot sell it. And you must not harm the property by carelessness. You can't fail to, just a little bit of dirt work would keep that creek from washing out the corner of your house. Just because you're the life estate tenant doesn't mean you get to let the creek wash the house away, because there's someone else who's depending on you. So all this is negated if you have absolute, fee tail ownership, if you absolutely own the property. So, anyway, oh boy. Principle 16. Oh, by the way, every one of these little titles in here on, let's just say, page 381 through, I'd say 390. It's hard to say. Yeah, 381 to the end of the chapter. That's really important. Every one of those, there are 11 principles necessary to adverse possession. And they don't ask you all of that on the SIT exam, but you'd better know it. This right here on 390, this is an example that shows up all over the place in Brown's writing.
Okay.
And I think he was involved in that case. I hope he wasn't I don't think he was the surveyor that did the bad thing. Because what you have here is a 2-degree, hello, 2 degrees difference from a right angle. Okay, so instead of going due west, have you done any of that?
No.
You were talking about graduating.
Yeah.
If you intend to graduate, that would be a real good thing to do.
I don't think I'm ready to yet, though.
Okay,
I think I need to do this semester and one more. Next semester I need to talk to her.
okay. Well, I mean, I let you know.
Right.
So, kind of like if you want to graduate, you
I need
gotta
to talk to
do
her.
everything. And I can't do it for you.
I will, yeah, I'll get a hold of her. I may do it this time just so I know what to do.
Okay. The issue was, and this is an old ranchero survey. So the original line was not, this meridian line is true. This line is 2 degrees off. So the deed called for going up 10 chains. How far is that? 6 from this fence line right here, which is the baseline for whatever, and then take a 90-degree, a right angle turn. Well, as it turns out, the surveyor held the fence because it was parallel to the baseline. He didn't read the deed. And so the client built the house right up against the fence, or very close to the fence, and part of the house is not on his land. Who got sued? The surveyor.
Oh.
Because the homeowner was sued, therefore the surveyor was sued. And that's the nice thing. If you've got a house on pier and beam, it's not the end of the world. If you have a house on a concrete foundation, a slab, so,
More difficult to scoot it over.
yeah.
But not impossible.
With a slab, yeah, it's impossible.
No way, I've seen them do it.
Not a slab.
Absolutely,
Okay.
those ones across the street from Midland Christian, those were slab houses, and they picked them up and moved them to Gardendale.
Okay. Well, were they,
I swear to you, they were on the truck, dude.
well, were they portable buildings?
No, these were houses
how did
built in
they-
the
I
ground.
want to say, how would they do it without breaking the cement or?
I know, it looked like it was a big old mess, but I don't know, I guess I could be wrong. That doesn't happen very often.
Fortunately not. Okay, Principle 16. It's a really simple question. How does a surveyor determine senior
A
rights?
simple question, but is it a simple answer?
Oh, no. If it were just the patent surveys, it would be the date of the survey. Well, what if somebody made a mistake? A surveyor, and working on a senior survey, a resurvey, retracement, calls for the line between the older property and a newer piece, and he calls for it following the line of the newer piece. Guess what he just did?
Lied about the date.
He didn't lie about the date because he didn't include the date in his field notes.
Right, but if he used something from a newer surveyor and he's saying he did it prior to that, is that what you're
No,
saying?
what I'm getting at,
Oh, I'm sorry.
okay.
I lost too.
Okay. Okay, 2 patent surveys.
Okay.
Located in 1877. This one is located in 1898.
Okay.
Who's got senior rights
So-
between A and B?
A.
Now, what if A gets a retracement survey in 1925,
Okay.
and it calls for, the field notes call for
Oh, what?
the boundary line between A and B.
Okay, and
in
then
its
calls for the
description.
monument set in 1898 for
Right,
B.
for A.
Huh?
Yet these monuments here
Mhm.
were set in 1877, right?
Okay.
They are called for in this survey of 1898,
Okay.
right? But in 1925, there's a retracement survey, and it has to do with the boundary line between these two, and the surveyor
accidentally in his field notes calls for the boundary starting here, going to there, going to there, going to there, and then following and along the line formed by the northwest corner of B to the southwest corner of B.
Well, then B becomes C.
B becomes C.
Because then
Why?
he's used that for reference.
Because the surveyor in 1925 screwed up
So,
by describing it that way. He actually gives senior rights to B.
so you should not say that something is a common line?
Well, what you should
Just
do,
depends.
what you should not do is call for this monument, which if you call for a line to an adjoining survey, that has the dignity of a natural monument.
Okay. Well, what if you say, a corner found, this is what I found for the corner of A. You don't mention B at all, but B uses that corner also.
Ideally, you don't mention him.
That's what I'm
No,
saying.
but see, when you go back and look at that deed, you're still gonna reference back to 1877.
You should be referencing back to that.
Right.
Yeah, but even if you reference the one from 1898, you go back to the 1898 deed, you're gonna
Mhm.
reference back to 1877.
He may or may not. It may actually not reference A.
I mean, that's the
So-
only reason he'd make the mistake though, right? If you're going back in time, going backwards.
Well, you're not
I don't
going,
know.
basically, you're not going back in time. See, these two surveys might not well, they were done,
Obviously, 77 is
Yeah.
not going to mention 98.
That's what I
no.
mean, but
But 25 mentions 98 and gives it a dignity of a natural monument.
Hmm.
He has accidentally,
Even if he recovers the corners called for in 77
Mhm.
and does not say, I'm going from the corner of B, just says,
if he doesn't mention B,
with
he
the
did his
west line
job.
of B.
If
Okay.
he follows the line from the northwest corner of B to the southwest corner of B,
Well, then why do you see all kinds of
I
field
see
notes
that all the
saying,
time.
saying this
that-
being the common corner of sections 3 to 10 and 11 and 10? You know what I mean? Like,
if it was simultaneous creation, that's not an issue.
okay, what if it's the same
This is
surveyor?
not simultaneous creation.
Okay, so then that implies simultaneous creation. If you see that in field notes, does that imply
Well,
that?
if,
I mean,
you know,
would, of
look
course,
at the
verify it
origi-
by
you know,
the next.
What you're probably looking at is a railroad survey where
Right.
you've got lots and blocks created at the same time.
Right.
Simultaneous creation does not have junior senior rights.
Okay.
Sequential conveyance has junior
So
senior
that's
rights.
a separate issue.
Yeah.
Not to be confused.
Right.
Okay.
So yeah, you guys are spoiled out here. You know, that although just because they were created doesn't mean they were monumented. As you well know.
yeah.
And because, I mean, you might have to come from 8 or 10 miles away to find anything. Further? Much further?
1 or 2 miles usually.
Okay.
Block corners be best.
Okay. I've heard horror stories.
Depends where you're at.
Yeah.
Monahans, Sand Hills around that area. I will just give up. Just tie a couple of wells and build it off that.
Just wait for the dunes to move. Or
Yeah, some of that stuff could be, God, I don't tell
it could be 60 feet deep. Some of the dunes are 60 feet tall.
Yeah.
And when the original monuments were set, they were set wherever the dune was at that point.
Yeah.
So the dune could actually, here's this poor little monument sitting there, and then 50 years later, the sand is up here. Are you going to dig down to it?
You need to.
No.
Yeah. Do you know? Oh, by the way, we picked up another Schoenstatt.
I lost mine.
No, it's not yours.
I
Oh,
was going
okay.
to say, and Paul found it.
No,
Yeah, I
it
thought
was
it was bad.
donated by John Wallace, a surveyor. He donated all of that stuff back there that I'm gradually trying to give the Heimlich maneuver to make it work again. But I'm told the original monuments were they like in the Monahan Sand Hills area, like 2-inch iron?
2-inch high piece.
iron pipe.
Yeah.
So
4 to 5 feet tall.
if you actually did get a Schonstedt close to one, it
does.
would sing.
Well, it depends how deep it is.
Yeah. I don't know how deep those go. I'm told 10 feet on something that big, but you'd really have to be paying attention.
I mean, if you got a buzz in the middle of nowhere,
Yeah.
and it was that good, it's close enough for an oil well.
Well, it
2 feet, 3 feet.
it all depends. But yeah, because you're not doing boundary surveying when you're
Exactly.
locating an oil well. You're shooting to the specifications of the Railroad Commission. But what I'm getting at here, and I forgot, I simply did not explain that senior rights and junior rights do not exist when you have simultaneous creation. So if you have, granddad died, and he wants to break up 640 acres into 4 parts. It depends on how it's done. If he makes a subdivision up so that all 4 lots are created simultaneously, then you don't have junior senior rights. If he gives in order to Bob the northwest quarter containing 160 acres, to Gene he gives the northeast corner containing 160 acres, to Jennifer southwest quarter 160 acres, and then he gives to and this is in order, then he gives to Hildegard the southeast quarter of 160 acres. What if there is only 600 acres?
Hildegard's just.
Hildegard may be out of luck.
What are there, 680?
Hildegard may be sitting pretty. Yeah, it all depends. Because what you could eliminate this by setting up a family trust. Family trusts exist when there isn't any family trust. And, it's just, sometimes the magic works. Sometimes it works out very well. Other times it's just making a family feud last another 80 years. Oh boy. Did we go through Principle 16? How does a surveyor determine senior rights? Reading very carefully. And obviously, if you're surveying a piece of land, Principle 16, you're reading the deeds for the adjoinders. You're not just going out and solving the puzzle for one piece. You're not just shooting 4 corners. You're shooting your 4 corners and up the line, up the line, up the line, up the line, if you're prudent. If you're in a subdivision, you tie it into something else besides just that lot. Principle 17. Okay, if possession is not an agreement with measurement, and if an original survey were made, the surveyor must determine whether the possession represents where the evidence of the footsteps of the original surveyor were. Okay, this assumes a lot, that you've got an original survey, that there's enough evidence to where you determine what the footsteps of the original surveyor are. If possession duplicates the footsteps of the original survey, then the possession does not represent an unwritten